I never imagined my life would come crashing down the moment I found out my teenage daughter was pregnant. Ellie, my daughter, the one I thought I knew so well, was hiding something so big, so life-altering, that it sent me into a spiral. My mind raced, my heart pounded. For the first time, I didn't know how to fix it. I had always prided myself on being a good mother, but now I was facing a reality I was completely unprepared for. Welcome to this story. Before we start, please hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story, and drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from. Your support means the world, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I can't sleep. My mind keeps replaying the moment she told me, over and over, like a broken record. Guilt and confusion twist in my chest, and every time I look at Ellie, I feel this knot in my stomach. I should have noticed something sooner. I should have done more. How did we get here? And now, how do I move forward when everything I thought I knew about being a mother feels like it's crumbling? I've always been a proud mother. Raising my kids felt like the one thing I could do right. I met my husband young, and together we built a life full of love and stability, or so I thought. But Ellie, my oldest, changed. I noticed her pulling away, staying out late, hiding her phone, but I brushed it off as teenage rebellion. Looking back, I can see the signs now, but I never imagined something like this could happen to us. The first sign something was wrong didn't come in a dramatic outburst or an argument. It came in the quiet moments, the subtle shifts I didn't know how to name until it was too late. Ellie had always been my confidant. Since she was little, she'd tell me everything, the silly things at school, the crushes she'd never admit to anyone else. We had our rhythm, a mother and daughter who could talk about anything without feeling judged or awkward. But that rhythm slowly changed. And I didn't even notice it happening until it had already altered the course of everything. At first, it was small, a shift in tone, a moment where she wouldn't look me in the eye when we spoke. Just a little crack in the trust I had taken for granted. Ellie, who had once come to me for everything, now seemed to be shutting me out. I'd ask her what was wrong, why she'd been so distant, but she'd brush me off with a vague, "I'm fine, Mum." The longer she spoke, the less I believed it. I could hear the lie in her voice, the guardedness that wasn't there before. And it wasn't just that. Her phone, once a harmless part of her life, something we both trusted, had become a fortress. I caught her glancing at it whenever I walked into the room, quickly swiping the screen when I came too close. It wasn't like Ellie to hide things from me. I remember the last time she'd done it, when she was around 12 and I found a secret diary hidden under her bed. It wasn't a major thing, just typical teenage rebellion. But this felt different. It wasn't a teenage phase anymore. It felt like she was deliberately keeping something from me. A part of me knew it was wrong to invade her privacy, but then another part, the part that loved her more than anything, told me I needed to know what was going on. I didn't know what else to do. One evening after dinner, I noticed her phone lying on the couch, left unattended. Her bedroom door was closed, which was unusual, but I felt a strange urge to pick it up. I told myself I wasn't snooping. I was just being a mother, worried about her. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. When I unlocked the phone, I wasn't prepared for what I found. It wasn't just one message or one odd conversation. There was a thread of text that made my stomach churn. The words were intimate, the tone far too personal for a girl her age. My heart began to race as I scrolled, but I couldn't stop myself. The name at the top of the messages didn't mean anything to me, but the way they spoke to each other, how casual they were with language that should never be used by someone who still needed their mother's protection, was enough to make my skin crawl. A knot formed in my chest as I read on, each message darker than the last. It wasn't just a crush or something innocent. It was something deeper, something I couldn't quite understand. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew I should have stopped. I knew I should have put the phone down and waited for her to come to me, but the more I read, the more the fear set in. I didn't know what was happening to my daughter, but I knew it was something I couldn't ignore. The feeling of betrayal hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She wasn't the little girl I used to know, and I wasn't the mother I used to be. I put the phone back down slowly, as though my actions might somehow be erased by the passage of time. But it wasn't that simple, was it? I couldn't unsee what I had just seen. I couldn't undo the hurt that had lodged itself deep in my chest. My daughter, my Ellie, was slipping away from me, and I had no idea why. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal. I made dinner, helped with her schoolwork, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. I watched her more closely now, trying to understand the distance growing between us. She was so quiet, so withdrawn. There were still moments, brief, fleeting moments, where the old Ellie shined through. A smile, a word of kindness. But they were fewer and farther between. The worst part was that I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if there was anything I could say or do to bridge the gap that had opened between us. It felt like I was speaking to a stranger instead of my daughter. I tried asking her directly. One afternoon, I sat her down, her eyes looking anywhere but at me. I asked her, "Ellie, what's going on?" I asked her, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know something is bothering you, and I need you to talk to me." But she didn't look up. She shrugged, barely whispering, "I'm fine, Mum. Please, I don't want to talk about it." I didn't push her farther. I didn't know how. But it was then that I realized I had crossed a line. I had broken our trust. And I didn't know if there was any way I could get it back. Each day the distance grew. She kept secrets, and I didn't know how to stop it. I was scared, terrified really, that whatever was going on in her life was something I couldn't protect her from. I wanted to pull her close and hold her like I had when she was younger, but it felt like she was running away even when she was standing right there. I knew she was hiding something from me, but the fear of what it might be kept me silent too. That was the first real breach, the first crack in the foundation of the relationship we once had. And I'm not sure I'd ever be able to fix it. Things started spiraling out of control when I discovered Ellie was skipping school. At first, it wasn't obvious. She'd always been a fairly responsible student, and I had no reason to believe that anything was amiss. But then the notes came home. You know, those ones. Those little slips of paper from school. The ones that seem to get lost in the shuffle until you find them much later, and by then, it's too late. The first one was from her English teacher. A polite note saying Ellie had missed several assignments. I tried to stay calm, to assume it was just a mistake, but deep down, I knew something was off. I asked Ellie about it, and she simply brushed it off, saying she'd been busy and would catch up. But the worry gnawed at me. It wasn't just English. Her grades in every subject began to slip. I found myself sitting at the kitchen table late at night trying to decipher the mess of grades, emails from teachers, and phone calls that seemed to be coming in more frequently. "She's not participating in class," one teacher said. "She's missing too many lessons," said another. Every report seemed worse than the last, and no matter how hard I tried to speak to her about it, Ellie seemed more distant, more unwilling to discuss anything of substance. I couldn't understand what was happening to my daughter. It felt like she was slipping through my fingers, and every effort I made to hold on only seemed to push her further away. I tried talking to her gently at first, asking what was wrong, asking why her grades were slipping, but she just shut down. When I pressed, she'd either lie or become defensive. "I don't know, Mum. I just don't feel like going." And that was it. No more answers. I knew she couldn't afford to fall behind, but the harder I pushed, the worse it became. The stress started to build in me like a tight knot, growing tighter with each passing day. I would catch her sneaking off to her room with that phone of hers, or I'd find her still in bed at 1 p.m. when she was meant to be at school. The house felt like it was filled with tension, and I couldn't escape it. I tried to be stricter, setting curfews, grounding her, taking her phone away. I thought maybe I wasn't being firm enough, that maybe if I took control, if I enforced rules, she'd snap out of it. But all it did was drive her further into herself. She'd argue with me at every turn, her voice filled with resentment and defiance, and I'd see that familiar look in her eyes, like I was the enemy. The child who used to seek my comfort, who used to listen to my advice, now seemed to be rejecting me at every opportunity. I was at a loss. I could see the change in her, feel the growing chasm between us, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to reach her anymore. Every day felt like a battle, and I was losing. It wasn't just her behavior. It was my own emotions, too. I was angry, frustrated, confused. I was scared, terrified that I might be failing her as a mother. I wanted to believe that if I just tried harder, things would get better. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep pushing her away like this. My husband, Greg, was absolutely clueless. He'd noticed the tension between us, but he'd chalk it up to her being a teenager. "She'll grow out of it, love," he'd say, trying to reassure me. "She's just going through a phase." But it wasn't a phase. Not this time. And the more I tried to convince him, the more I realized he wasn't going to understand. Not like I did. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let her slip through my fingers without fighting for her. So I doubled down. I started checking her phone more frequently, looking for clues, trying to understand what was going on. It wasn't healthy. I knew that. But I couldn't help myself. I had to know. I needed to understand. I needed to fix this. But the more I looked, the more I saw things that I wasn't ready to confront. Texts from friends I'd never heard of, messages that hinted at something I didn't want to know. But no matter how much I tried to piece it all together, the truth remained hidden, locked away behind her walls. And the more I searched for answers, the more I felt like I was losing my grip on everything. On her. On myself. The days turned into weeks, and the stress was unbearable. I felt like I was drowning in it. I had no idea how to make things right, no idea how to fix the mess we were in. The more I tried to push Ellie towards something resembling normalcy, the more she pushed back. And with every rejection, every silent dinner, every slammed door, I could feel the space between us growing wider, and I didn't know how to bridge it. I tried to stay calm, to be patient, but it wasn't enough. The pressure of it all was becoming too much for me to handle on my own, and the worst part was, I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to do anymore. I just wanted to bring my daughter back, but she wasn't the same girl anymore, and I wasn't the same mother. And neither of us knew how to fix it. It all came crashing down one day, in a way I never could have imagined. The afternoon started out like any other. I had spent the morning running errands, catching up with the housework, and trying to get a handle on the chaos that had become my life. I'd barely noticed the time slip away, but when I walked into the kitchen, there she was, Ellie, sitting at the table, her face pale, her hands nervously twisting a tea towel in her lap. She wasn't the girl I had known, the girl who would have rushed up to greet me with a smile, or at least greeted me with a joke. No, this Ellie was quiet, almost too still. I remember that moment so clearly, how my heart seemed to skip a beat as I looked at her. She wasn't looking at me, but I could feel the weight of her gaze on the floor. It wasn't right. It wasn't normal. "Mom?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper, the word hanging in the air between us. My stomach tightened. I already knew something was wrong. The air felt thick with tension, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could no longer read her. I knew she was struggling. I knew she wasn't the same girl she used to be, but I had no idea how deep the problem really went. I'd spent weeks, maybe months, trying to fix things, trying to bridge the ever-growing distance between us, but nothing worked. Nothing seemed to reach her anymore. And now there she was, sitting in front of me like a stranger, her silence screaming at me louder than words ever could. "Mom," she said again, and this time I could see her struggling to form the words. I could see her tears welling up in her eyes, threatening to fall but never quite breaking free. "I need to tell you something. It's really hard." At that moment, something inside me froze. My breath caught in my throat, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid to hear what came next. The tension between us was unbearable, and my mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, none of which seemed to fit. I braced myself, but nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "Mom, I'm pregnant." I don't know how to explain it, but when she said those words, it felt like the ground beneath me shifted. The world I thought I knew suddenly fractured, splitting apart at the seams. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could hear was that one sentence echoing in my head, repeating itself over and over until it drowned out everything else. My daughter, my little girl, the one who had once held my hand and looked up at me with such trust and love, was going to be a mother herself. It was too much to take in. I remember staring at her, not knowing what to do next. I wanted to hug her, to tell her everything would be okay, but the words wouldn't come. My chest tightened, and a cold rush of panic swept over me. My mind was in a fog, spinning, unsure of where to go, unsure of what I should do. My daughter, who had always been the bright, hopeful center of my world, was now carrying a life inside her. I could hardly wrap my head around it. How had this happened? Where had I gone wrong? I couldn't see a way forward. I couldn't see how we would move through this. For the longest time, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, looking at her, hoping that somehow the shock would wear off and I would wake up from whatever nightmare I had been thrust into. But the more I tried to make sense of it, the more the reality of what she had just said weighed down on me. I should have known. Part of me had been suspicious for months, but I had never been brave enough to confront her. What kind of mother doesn't even see the signs? What kind of mother lets her daughter slip into something so monumental without even realizing it? The guilt hit me like a slap to the face. I had failed her. I had failed as a mother, and now there was no turning back. Ellie, sitting there in front of me, wasn't the young girl I used to know. She was a woman, and I couldn't help but feel that I'd lost her. The room felt so small, so suffocating. I had no idea what to say, what to feel. I wanted to protect her, to shelter her from this moment, but I knew it was too late for that. It was too late for anything except facing what was in front of us now. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know what the next steps should be, but I did know one thing. This would change everything. Her eyes met mine then, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Fear, uncertainty, and something deeper. She was scared. Of course she was. And yet, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was the one who had failed her. Before you continue listening, If you're enjoying the journey, please take a few seconds to show your support by subscribing. Your subscription means a lot to me and my channel. It helps keep these stories alive, and without you, I can't continue sharing the twists, the turns, and the raw moments that speak to the heart. Please don't leave me hanging. Subscribe now. Thank you. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. There was no script for this, no rule book to follow. How do you even begin to process something like this? How do you reconcile the child you once held in your arms with the woman she had become in front of you? She said, "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't know how to tell you." And in that moment, everything changed. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes. All the questions I'd been asking myself for months, how did we get here? Why didn't I see this coming? Felt irrelevant now. The truth was laid bare, and I had no choice but to face it head on. As I sat there, stunned, I realized that whatever the future held, we would have to face it together. I wasn't sure how or even what that looked like, but I knew I couldn't abandon her now. No matter how difficult, no matter how painful it would be, I had to find a way to support her, to guide her. But for the moment, all I could do was sit there in silence, my heart racing in my chest, unsure of how to move forward. The shock of it all left me breathless. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her everything would be all right, but I had no idea how to make that promise when I didn't know how it would all turn out. I had no idea how to be a mother in this moment. But I knew one thing: this was only the beginning. Everything changed in an instant. It was like someone had pulled the rug out from under me, and suddenly I was falling, unable to catch my breath or regain my footing. The moment Ellie told me she was pregnant, I thought I was prepared for anything. I thought I could handle it. After all, I was a mother, wasn't I? I had navigated tantrums, teenage rebellion, the ups and downs of family life, but nothing in my experience had prepared me for this. Nothing had prepared me for the shock that hit me when I realized my daughter, my little girl, wasn't the child I had thought she was. She was something else now. And in that moment, I realized how little control I had over anything. I wasn't just facing a teenage pregnancy. No, this was something deeper, something I had never fully understood until now. We weren't just talking about a girl and a difficult decision. We were talking about generational trauma that I had ignored, wounds that had been left to fester for years. Ellie's pregnancy wasn't just the result of a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a reflection of everything that had been bubbling beneath the surface for too long. My first instinct was to blame myself. How had I failed her? What had I missed? As I sat there, watching her try to explain, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, if I had been more attentive, more understanding, none of this would have happened. Maybe I could have been a better mother. Maybe I should have been more present, more supportive. How had I let it get this far? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just Ellie's struggle. This was mine too. I had spent years building this image of myself as a good mother, someone who knew what was best, who could handle any situation with grace and calm. But now everything felt like it was falling apart. The trust between us, the trust I had worked so hard to build, was shattered. The control I once thought I had over our family was slipping away, piece by piece. I looked at Ellie, and I could see the same fear in her eyes that I felt inside. She was scared. Of course she was. But I couldn't protect her from this. I couldn't fix it for her. And that in itself was a sharp and painful blow. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, guilt, and anger. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to understand where things went wrong.
I thought about my own childhood, about the things my mother never taught me, about the mistakes I made in my own relationships, and how I had never fully dealt with those demons. It was as if the weight of all those unhealed wounds had suddenly resurfaced, and now I was seeing them reflected in my daughter's face. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just about Ellie's pregnancy. This was about the unspoken things, the secrets and struggles that had been passed down from generation to generation. I had never truly confronted the impact of my own upbringing, the things my mother never been able to give me, the things I had struggled to offer Ellie. I'd always thought I could shield her from the same mistakes, but in truth, I was only repeating them. The worst part was the feeling of failure that clung to me. I wasn't just failing Ellie. I was failing myself. The guilt ate away at me, gnawing at my insides. Every conversation we had after that moment felt strained, like I was walking on eggshells, afraid of saying the wrong thing or pushing her further away. But the more I tried to talk, the more she shut me out. She was scared, of course she was, but so was I. How could I fix this? How could I protect her when I didn't even know how to protect myself from the shame and regret I felt? At home, things grew quieter. The arguments became more frequent. Greg, my husband, was still trying to keep things white, brushing it off as a phase, but I knew it wasn't. I think he thought if we acted like everything was normal, it would just go away. But I couldn't pretend. I couldn't ignore what was happening, not when my world felt like it was falling apart. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that he wasn't seeing the whole picture, that he wasn't living through the weight of this with me, that I felt completely alone in it. But instead, I kept it all inside, locked away behind a smile that never quite reached my eyes. I kept telling myself to stay strong, but with each passing day, I could feel the cracks in my own strength widening. How could I help Ellie when I could barely help myself? Ellie's pregnancy was just the beginning, but it felt like the start of something much bigger, something I wasn't ready for. It wasn't just about being a mother, about supporting my daughter through a difficult time. It was about confronting everything I had been running from, about confronting the parts of my past that I had never dealt with. I didn't know if I was ready for that, but I knew it was inevitable. And as much as I tried to deny it, I couldn't escape the fact that everything, my relationship with Ellie, my sense of self, my family, was beginning to unravel in ways I couldn't control. I had always thought I could handle anything life threw at me. I had prided myself on being strong, on being the rock for my family. But now I was questioning everything. What kind of mother was I? What kind of wife was I becoming? And most painfully, what kind of woman was I becoming in the midst of all this chaos? I felt lost, and the worst part was I didn't know if I would ever find my way back. This wasn't just about Ellie. This was about me too. And as much as I wished I could protect her, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the only way forward was for both of us to face our pasts together, to confront the truths we had avoided, to break the cycle of silence and shame. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and I had no idea where it would lead.
I knew I had to face the reality. There was no running from it anymore, no avoiding the truth. My daughter was pregnant, and our world had been turned upside down. Everything had been spiraling. My emotions tangled up in guilt, confusion, and a growing sense of helplessness. The weeks that followed that dreadful revelation were a blur. Me trying to figure out how to handle it, how to be a mother when everything I knew about motherhood felt suddenly irrelevant. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't carry on like this. I couldn't pretend things were okay when they so clearly weren't. I couldn't keep pushing Ellie away, or worse, let her push me away. The silence between us had become deafening, and it was slowly killing me. She needed me, I knew that. But I needed to be there for her in a way that felt real, not forced, not out of duty. So one evening, after another long day of avoiding the issue, I finally made up my mind. I couldn't avoid it any longer. I had to sit with her, look her in the eyes, and ask the hard questions. I couldn't go on not knowing how she was feeling, what she was going through, or where we were headed. I found her in her room, as usual, sitting on her bed, her phone in hand. It was like a ritual now, her hiding behind that screen as though it was the only shield she had left. She didn't even look up when I knocked on the door. Just muttered, "Come in." The sight of her made my heart ache. My little girl, the one who used to share everything with me, was now someone I didn't fully recognize. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes weren't as bright. Her shoulders were always tense, like she was carrying the weight of the world. And in that moment, I knew it was time to let go of whatever pride I had left. I said, "Ellie," trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk. I can't keep pretending things are fine when they so clearly weren't. I need to understand, love. I need to know how you're feeling and what's going on in your head. This is as much my mess as it is yours." She hesitated for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her phone. I could see her trying to find the right words, the courage to say what was on her mind. The silence stretched between us like a canyon, and I could tell she was struggling. "Mom?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I wanted to reach out to hold her, but I stayed where I was, not wanting to push her too much. "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I didn't plan for this, Mom. I didn't want it to happen, but now it has, and I'm just lost." Those words landed between us like stones thrown into a still pond. The ripples kept going. I wanted to say something comforting. I wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her everything would be okay. But the truth was, I didn't have all the answers. I barely had any answers at all, and that scared me more than anything. I sat down next to her on the bed, careful not to crowd her, but close enough that she could feel my presence. I said, "I don't have the answers either, Ellie. I'm not going to pretend I know what to do or that I have it all figured out. But what I do know is that we're in this together. I know you're scared. I know you're feeling alone, but I'm here. We're going to figure this out one step at a time." She looked up at me then, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. I could see the walls she had built beginning to crack, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe we might begin to heal. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to be like this. I didn't know how to tell you." I pulled her into a gentle hug, finally wrapping my arms around her. I didn't know what the future held or how we would navigate the challenges ahead. But in that moment, I realized something important. No matter what happened, we had to keep talking. We had to face the difficult, painful truths. Only then could we begin to heal, both as individuals and as a family. Though the road ahead would be long and full of uncertainties, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't just about Ellie anymore. This was about us, our relationship, our bond, and I would fight for that, no matter what. I didn't have all the answers, but I had this,
a promise to try, to show up, to be vulnerable with her as she'd been vulnerable with me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we were finally on the same page, like we could face whatever came next as a team. And that, more than anything, gave me hope. Looking back now, I realize that unexpected events, no matter how devastating, give us the chance to rewrite our family story. At the time, I couldn't see it. I was too lost in the whirlwind of shock, guilt, and fear. But the truth is, my daughter's unplanned pregnancy, though it turned our world upside down, became the catalyst for something we both desperately needed: healing. It wasn't easy. There were days when it felt like we were just going through the motions, fighting through misunderstandings, tears, and words we couldn't take back. I didn't know how to help her, and she didn't know how to trust me. But in the end, it was the messiness, the pain, the vulnerability that allowed us to begin rebuilding. We didn't have all the answers, and we still don't. But we found a way forward, even if it's one small step at a time. At first, I was so focused on what we had lost that I missed what we could become. I saw Ellie as the girl who'd grown up too fast, the loss of innocence tearing me apart every time I looked at her. I wanted to shield her from the harshness of the world, but life doesn't always give you that choice. It throws things your way and expects you to find a way to carry on, even when you don't feel ready. What I learned through all of this is that unconditional love isn't about perfect solutions or easy answers. It's about showing up even when you don't know what you're doing. It's about accepting that life is messy, unpredictable, and often painful, and still choosing to move forward together. Ellie's pregnancy didn't destroy us as I feared. In fact, it gave us the opportunity to face what we had been avoiding, to confront the unspoken fears and wounds we'd both been carrying for far too long. It was a wake-up call. Painful, yes, but necessary in ways I couldn't see at the time. I'll be the first to admit I wasn't the mother I thought I was. I made mistakes, and I still do. But I've learned to embrace those imperfections. Love doesn't always look neat. Sometimes love is holding each other through the mess, even when you don't know how it's going to turn out. In the months that followed, as Ellie embraced her new reality, I began to see her differently. She wasn't just a rebellious teenager. She was someone who had faced a challenge many would have crumbled under. And yet she was standing, learning, growing. I watched her take on the responsibility of being a mother, and I saw and heard the same fierce love I'd always had for her. And that changed me. We're not perfect, far from it, but perfection isn't the goal. The goal is to love each other through the mistakes, to learn from the hard moments, and to keep going even when it feels like rock bottom. There is strength in vulnerability and immense power in finding healing when the world seems to be falling apart.
If there's one thing I wish I could tell every mother, every woman who feels lost or alone in her struggles, it's this. Life doesn't always turn out the way we plan, but that doesn't mean it's the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something new, a chance to rewrite our stories, to heal, and to grow stronger than we ever thought possible. Ellie and I, we're not where we thought we'd be. We still have our tough days. We still have moments where we don't know what the future holds. But we're stronger now. We've learned how to communicate, how to show up for each other, even when it feels hard. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. So, while I can't change the past, I can choose how we move forward. And what I realized is that despite the pain, despite the tears, we've come out the other side with a deeper, more meaningful bond than I ever could have imagined. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of my daughter, and I'm proud of the journey we've been on together. In the end, Life is never about perfection. It's about the people we love and the way we choose to love them through every challenge, every mess, and every moment of growth. And that's a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss out on the next one. Please subscribe now to keep following more stories and turn on the notification bell to get exclusive updates straight to your inbox. Your support helps me keep creating these stories that speak to the heart.